My guest today is Giovanni Lanzani. Gio leads the GoDataDriven Academy, a training company specializing in data and artificial intelligence. He works with executives, data scientists, and data engineers from some of the largest companies in the Netherlands. He has a doctorate from Leiden University on DNA mechanics, an unbounded knowledge in statistical physics and stochastic processes. He's also authored several papers, one of which sounds like an impossible dream, namely writing high-quality, bug-free software. He's also personally a designer and designs a pair of shoes for each new member of the GoDataDriven team. Welcome, Gio.
Thanks, Richard. Thanks for having me.
So, tell me, when businesses want to become more data-driven, what are the main challenges they face, and where do you think they should start?
Yeah, that's a pretty good question. I think that uh, they have challenges on the technical side. Where is my data? Um, where do I store it to make it analyzable? So, for example, people are using Salesforce or are using HubSpot, they're using Google Analytics, they're using all these systems here. And of course, to make sense the data, find correlations between the data needs to be stored, hopefully, in a single place. And that's a pretty hard problem. Like, first, how do I get it? And second, where do I store it? And once you have it, the next challenge is, who do I have that is able to analyze the data and make sense of it from a sound perspective, so that the conclusions that we gather from the data are sound and we can do something about it. And the third part from the technical side is that, is it actionable, in the sense that can I do something with the conclusions that I gather from the data? So if the conclusion is we're spending a lot of money into for gas, well, it's true, but it's very hard to do something about it. So you have to find problems that are actionable. And which brings me to the second set of challenges, which is from the business side, because again, the first part is that where does the value lie? So where are my pains from a business perspective, and can we use data to solve those pains? So that's the first part on the business side. And the second part, especially with traditional business, is that if you want something that is actionable, so let's say you want to optimize your forecasting, how much you need to order from your suppliers, or how much you have to deliver to your customers, and you want to optimize that, and you solved all the technical challenges, so you got the data, you have people that are able to to make head of tails of it, and the next one is that, well, are the end users, so the people that actually need to make the order or they need to talk to the suppliers, are they willing to follow what an algorithm said? And very often these people, again, in traditional companies, they're working there since 5, 10, 15, 20 years, maybe even more, and they always did things in a certain way, and they're not ready to change that. And so they're going to say, well, the algorithm is nice, but I know better. And I contributed to the business where we are today. I'm not going to listen to a machine right now. So that's another, I think, pretty hard problem to solve. And the third one, I think the third challenge is, how do we measure it? Very often, people I think they're really used to, especially in the marketing context, to work a lot with data and to gather a lot of data from your users, how they come into the website. People launch marketing campaigns, but then of course you need to think about, how do we measure if what we've done is making an impact? And that's also pretty challenging. And of course, some things are easier than others. So if you think about forecasts, you can say, 1 week ago I forecasted that X would be 10, and then today I can compare, is X 11 or 8 or 5 or something else. But not everything is so measurable, because you have so many external factors that, reality is pretty messy and it kind of gets in between. So you have to get all the three things right. So you have to, the technical part needs to be covered. The business part, does the business need it and are they going to use it? And then also the measuring the impact part needs to be covered. So I think these three are kind of challenges that a lot of the traditional businesses face today.
So you use that definition of traditional business. Are most of your clients traditional businesses, or are most of your clients organizations that have to use data because their business model is not totally but predominantly online, and so they have a very modern business model rather than, say, a traditional company? Where is the mix of clients that you work with?
That's a good question. I think that the majority of companies are traditional companies, so that is kind of reflected in our customer base, just because there's more of them, and they usually need more help. But we also have quite some tech native customers. So think companies like Booking.com, eBay, Agent, Uber. They're all customers of ours, and they are really tech native. But again, if we look at the landscape, the total landscape, the tech native companies, just less of them.
Yeah, but if they're tech native, why do they need you? Surely, they can analyze the data. The data's all in good places because they've only been around for less than a decade. They don't have those legacy systems where data is stored in different systems under, in different buildings even. So surely they've already been doing it. Surely they've always been data driven, AI driven from the start.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's also a very good question. I think that it's very true what you said. Like on the technical level, they usually do not need external providers, and you could see that culturally they're almost averse to them. But of course, they also know where it makes sense to ask for external help. And personally, I lead the academy, so we deliver training to these companies, and they know that very often educating, having educational program for a small part of their, employees, it's not really their core business. And of course, if they're a company where everybody, or like where thousands of people need to program, Java, for example, it makes a lot of sense to have internal programs dedicated to that. But if you need 20 people to know something very specific about, a particular technology, let's say Apache Spark, then it makes much more sense to hire an external party that has done that not for 20, but for 200 people, and they can actually reap the benefits of this sort of, specialized programs. So that's where we come in.
Excellent. So let's talk about the traditional businesses. So, businesses have always been transforming themselves. They've always gone through that cycle of new strategy, new leadership team. How do we move on? How do we compete with the marketplace? So for those traditional businesses, as you said, you've got to bring together the trust in the algorithm. You've got to have the people that are actually willing to do this stuff. But do you find that using data analytics and AI in those businesses enables better decisions to be made? Or do you still find that even at the top of the office, knowing that they have to move forward, there's still that reluctance to believe what the algorithm tells them? Is that any different from the reluctance to adopt a new strategy and really go for it? So is it the same business problem, that you know what you got to do, but you're not brave enough to do it?
Yeah, so in this regard, I always think about when electricity came out, but we could make the same.
That was before my time, Gio.
Yeah,
my
it was
time.
before our time. It was before our time, but before electricity, if we think like in England and the cotton factory, and it was all steam powered, and electricity came around, and the businesses that were successful, they all made the transitions, and the one that didn't make the transitions were kind of outcompeted away. And you can think about, it's obvious, electricity, why would we want to make the switch, right? And it's a bit like the same with electric cars today. And you say, 100 years from now, they're going to look at gasoline cars and say it's so primitive, right? With an engine exploding and you would, pump dead dinosaurs out of the, in a very environmentally unfriendly way. But of course, once you have an electric car, it doesn't stand on itself. You need an infrastructure to charge it. You need, specialized people to repair it. You maybe need new software to operate it. And they're all things that, do not come for free. And just because you can make an electric car, you don't have all the other elements. So all the other elements need to be in place. And again, like with electricity and the steam cotton factory, you need to train people to use the new machinery. You didn't know if it was available 24/7, and right now, of course, it's in the Western world, it's just unthinkable that we do not have 24/7 access to electricity. But 100 years ago, 150, if I had to bet my business and say, we're going to now run on electricity, I can hear like all the people that say, well, but we'll always have coal, and the steam engine is always going to run on coal, so that's and electricity is kind of fiddly, and we don't know. We just bought a new machines, now we have to buy them again. And I think that with AI is the same thing, right? It's not just we can make the algorithms, because we could make machine learning algorithms already in the 80s, but it's also, can I use the data that I have? Is this data actionable? Can I trust the algorithm? What are the ethics implications? And very often these algorithms are part of open source libraries, and you even ask yourself, can I trust these open source libraries? Somebody else wrote this in their spare time. Is it something that I want to, build my business upon, or a new part of my business upon? So you are actually relying on what you could say an infrastructure that is outside of your domain of influence.
That's fascinating, absolutely fascinating, because I think that encapsulates, the real problem, is it? It's not about one element of it, it's about that infrastructure. And does that infrastructure exist so you can plug into it? So, are there enough skilled people available to help me analyze my data? Are there people around that can help me bring these things together and put it into a single format? And I can see that argument that different elements develop at different speed, and all of a sudden it comes a time when it all works together. And if you're not part of that movement, then you're probably too late. I like that comparison between electricity and the steam-powered looms, and I can see that. So, when you're working with clients, these clients from the traditional world, when you start to show them what data can do, when you start to show them how you can analyze this, and you start to get them to use data in their decision-making processes, what's the usual reaction to people? Is it one of disbelief? Is it one of we better run it in parallel? Or is it one of let's do the normal thing? It's very interesting, Gio, but can we just do another pilot? Can we just check the data again before we really step forward and make that decision?
Yeah, I think the most surprising thing is that it happens when they see that the data disagree with the way they were running the business before. So because it means, of course, if you're an entrepreneur and you build a business, you're proud of what you did or what you've done, and you also think that you did quite a good job while you were at it. And if the data actually say something different than what you were doing, or even slightly different, like a correction, you think, well, I was leaving money on the table all these years before using the data. And then it's kind of a realization where, I don't want to say you enter in shock, but you say to yourself, well, what's happening? Some people entering what you could say it's a state of denial. And to give an example, to make it a bit more tangible, we were creating a forecasting tool for supermarket chain, and we would say how many items of, how many loaf of bread do you need to have in store for every different type of bread that they had in store. And we were doing that for quite a lot of supermarket. But when we started, we had maybe 5 or 10 or 20, it's on that order. And many of those supermarkets were owned by, they were working with a franchise. So you had franchisers. And the first time they saw the results of this forecasting tool, they said, I know better. So we said, okay, we're going to give you the option to override the prediction and to order how much you want. Could be less, could be more. You say your business, your shop. You'll be running it for, again, 20 years. We're not gonna be bossy. We're gonna show what we think, what the data thinks, and you can override that thought. And we did that, I think, for a whole month. And then we came back to them showing the results and showing, every time you disregarded the algorithm, you actually left money on the table because you said to order 10 and you ordered 20, and the next day you returned those 10 extra items you ordered. Or maybe you ordered 5 when we said 10, and at 9:30 in the morning you ran out of bread. So basically, people had to, look for bread somewhere else simply because you didn't listen to the algorithm. And once they saw like the cost, because of course you can very quickly kind of, say this is the cost that you're incurring by not listening, then they switched their attitude towards the algorithm immediately. They even say, okay, well, apparently I don't know how much I should order, and I should trust what the data said. It was beautiful.
That's interesting. I can remember we have a supermarket near us, and they used to sell some specialty pastries, and they always sold out by about 11 o'clock. So I can remember having the conversation with someone, why don't you order more? And they said, we're only allowed to order 12 boxes a day, or whatever it was. And you say, yeah, but you could sell more. And the answer was, no, but we sell 100% of what we buy. Yeah, you're selling all you buy, but you could sell more. And no, I can understand that on how, you really do need to trust the information, trust the data that you have. So is there a common denominator then that unifies the companies that trust the data? If you looked at the characteristics of some of your clients who work with you, identify the business problem, have the skills in-house, and then as the data tells them what to do, they follow the data, they follow that evidence, and they're growing. What would be, is it back to the right people in the organization to analyze it, to have a real business problem you've got to solve, or is there something else that's a common theme between those companies?
Yeah, I think the common theme between companies that really use the data and, to make an impact on their business and, in the environment and the society around them is actually that it's really hard to find and retain talent. That's what we're seeing everywhere. And all organizations have their own, peculiarities, you could say. So they're all different. But the thing that everyone has is that it's hard to find the right people, and once we found them, to retain them, because it's just like, you said it during the introduction that I designed the shoes of GoDataDriven, and actually from I think 2014, I changed my business title on LinkedIn from data scientist to shoe designer because I was getting so many recruiter calls and email every day, and I just didn't want to deal with it. So I changed that from data scientist to shoe designer to actually make it stop. And of course, it stopped with tech companies, and I started to getting offer from China to go there and design some shoes in China. But that it was easy to pass them on. But the for me, that there was the thing that made it stop, that made all this unwanted recruiting stop. However, everyone else is in exactly the same situation. So all our colleagues, all the people working on the customer, they continuously keep, getting offers from not just, in exotic location around the world. You have to relocate. No. You're going to stay where you are. It's going to be, we're going to pay you more. We're going to give you this more, that more. And so everyone is kind of fighting for the same it seems like the same pool of people. And I really hope that due to the pandemic and the kind of shift to more remote-friendly environments, that we're also going to be able to tap the talents from underrepresented minorities, where we can actually create a space to work for where it doesn't matter where you live, as long as the time zone is approximately okay. If you can do good work, we can offer you a job. And I hope that this trend will make the job situation a bit better.
I mean, that's a terrific idea, but how do you overcome the security issues with some of your clients' data? Because I'd imagine that if you're working with clients' data, you've got an insight into their business. They clearly must trust you, your colleagues within GoDataDriven, in sharing some of these things with them. But if you've got a very dispersed workforce from around the world, don't you then run into that problem about how can your client trust you to trust the person you're using somewhere else in the world? How do you overcome that problem?
Yeah, I think that's a very interesting question, because on one side there's like the presupposition that people from outside, quote unquote, are less trustworthy. Of course, it's much easier to to be the bad person if you're in a jurisdiction where nobody can catch you, right? If you're around the world and there is no extradition with the UK, then you say, well, I can do whatever I want and be fine with it. And that's true on one hand. On the other hand, I think that we need to start, and I think a lot of companies are doing that. We need to start thinking into how do we make our infrastructure so set up in such a way that I do not get access to any valuable data, like real valuable data. I get access to a mass copy or something along those lines, where I can still create an analysis that is valuable, but that analysis needs then to be performed on the production systems. And to get to the production system, I need like 3 pairs of eyes before getting there, so that you cannot just get access to the data. And so I think we need also to have a paradigm shift there, because if you have a really bad actor, they are the one that have absolutely no problem relocating and getting to your office every day, right?
I mean, I would agree with you. We had a bad actor within the building, and he did some bad stuff with our data. So I wasn't. It doesn't matter where they are. It is about, do you know them? So they could be sitting opposite you, and they could be doing bad stuff. But I think the interesting thing must be, can you build the technology, as you say, that safe place where it doesn't really matter who's working on that data? You can protect the intellectual property, you can protect the valuable data of your clients. Because if that problem can be solved, then clearly you can have multiple people coming together to solve some of those challenges, which actually changes that whole dynamic of capability.
Yeah, I think most of the time you can. However, most of the time you can secure your systems to, with respect to external intruders, and still some companies do not do that because it takes more effort. And it's not, you will not see it on your bottom line next quarter. You're only going to notice if something goes wrong. And then we have the tendency, of course, to think that, no, of course it could go wrong, but it will not go wrong. But then Murphy's Law come from right around the corner and bites us. So I think you can do that, but companies still decide not to do it because they do not perceive that as a priority very often. So
Yeah.
that's the reason we hear about ransomware every other week.
Yeah, and that's bizarre. Yeah. Isn't that bizarre? We all have insurance. We have insurance on our property, we have insurance on our cars, we have insurance on our lives. None of us ever wants to claim on an insurance policy, but we know that is good common sense. Yeah. But we don't apply the same thing to security systems and spend the money to make sure they are secure. No, yeah. It's a real
And it's
problem.
also like a lot of, I don't want to say ignorance, but like less, like a low savviness from the insurance perspective. Like I have my electrical bike is insured, but to get, to claim the insurance if it's stolen, I had to show that I had the key to the locks, meaning that the key, that the bike was locked when it was stolen. But they do not do that with IT security systems. They do not know how do I ask them for the key, like the equivalent in IT. They didn't come up with it yet, so that's why it's all kind of lagging behind.
So, coming back to this search for talent, the dearth of talent, if you were the Minister of Education for the Netherlands today, what would you be doing for high school students to make sure that they were prepared for a world that's a data-driven world of work? What would be the number one priority to make sure people at high school can be equipped with the basic knowledge they need to live in that environment?
Yeah, I grew up in Italy, and I think that here I actually can take some from the Italian way of doing education and some from the Dutch way. I think that you need two things, and the first one is curiosity, and the second one is a scientific mindset. And curiosity, because as we said before, to get value out of the data, you need to go and see where do I need it in the business, which areas of my business would be better if you would deploy data driven solutions. And so you need to be curious, to ask around, to want to explore. And I think that is something like this, exploring, this networking within the company, is something that is done. I think it's done in the proper way here in the Netherlands, if I look from a kind of outsider perspective. On the other hand, I think about this, the scientific mindset, where you say, we're going to make an hypothesis, we're going to test it, we're going to see what's coming out of it, and we're going to try to do it with a bit of rigor. I see that, in Italy, this kind of scientific mindset was very hammered on from the beginning. We were kind of more influenced from the French style, when you had Descartes and the scientific method in the 1600, I believe 1700. And I think that merging both words is going to be very successful. So like the word of basically combining induction and deduction when it comes to data. You cannot say we're all going to be, we're only going to use deduction. That's not good. But also we're only going to use induction. That's also not good, because you have some science, because at the end of the day, statistics is science. But you also have the business part, because to add value, you need to create something that makes business sense. So I think combining these two is what is going to be really, really important from an educational perspective.
And do you believe that business executives, say in the next 5 to 10 years, will be writing their own programs, analyzing their own data, applying their own curiosity, drawing their own conclusions? Is the data scientist a transitory role? Do you see the data scientist starting to lose out in the future because most business people will be able to do it for themselves?
I think they will be able to ask many more questions by themselves, because and we see this kind of trend already, where this self-service analytics is called, where people can get to the data and ask their question. So to make an example, that again with Uber, at Uber, every manager needs to be able to query the data warehouse, so basically the data that Uber has, because of course if they have like a question, or they want to know something, they do not have to rely on other people to ask those questions there. Probably they always need to rely when when the things get more complicated, when you need some more advanced validation or some advanced solution that requires coding, for example. Then they will always kind of pass this on to the more specialized roles.
So, Gio, when you look back over your career, what three things do you know now that you would like to have known when you started?
It's a very good question. So the first one is that the people and mindset are more important than tools. The second one is that the academic mindset doesn't work very well in the industry, because in academia you try to be very, very good in a super tiny, domain, but usually in the industry you need to have a much broader perspective, and also the level is completely different. And again, it's not research, you don't have to publish. And the third one is, well, it's actually pretty funny, that having kids helps you to be a better leader, because you kind of learn how to help people grow. And sometimes these people are like small people, sometimes they're adults, but in both cases you have a lot of very valuable skills when trying it at home first.
Fascinating. I happen to know you have 7 children, so clearly you're practicing that development activity year after year, which is why you must be such a great person to work for.
Well, you can ask my colleagues that and see how they reply.
Gio, I have to ask you, as the chief shoe designer, do you actually design and make the shoes, or do you take a pair of shoes and create something specific for the individual?
Yeah, so we usually order Nikes, and Nikes has I think the program is called Nike IDs, or similar, where you can, they have maybe 20, 30, 50 shoes that you can pick from, and then customize what should be written on it, all the colors from the sole, the laces, the swoosh. So what I do is that I think twice a year I make a new design, and then everybody that joined in the last 6 months get that kind of version. So you can see, for how many years people have been in the company by looking at the shoes they wear.
Brilliant. Gio, many, many thanks for your time. Fascinating talking to you. I mean, this combination of the creative side, the curiosity side in designing shoes for each new member of staff, and your depth of knowledge in the technology. Yeah, it's a great combination. Many, many thanks for your time.
Thanks, Richard, for having me.